The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference. I'm Susan Brender, and today I'm with my co-host, Sean Eugene Flynn. Now, this podcast takes a very fresh new look at an ancient disorder that had very few people understanding it. We like to call it a couple of things, but the first thing that we'd like to call it is PTSD, first responders. It's a straight approach to learning about the subject that many people dare not speak of. It tells stories about those who suffer and the negative and the possibility of dramatic effects from post-traumatic stress disorder, specifically those in emergency services and their families. Sean, I would like you now, as we start this series of shows that we're going to do on various topics, but focusing on PTSD, I'd like you to explain to people what PTSD really is.
Well, Susie, thank you. It's an honor to be here on the show. And just as a disclaimer, number one, being totally grateful. So I qualify as a former first responder. Just want to make sure that everyone knows that my opinion here today is not that of any medical professional. I don't have certifications for anything medically. I'm not a counselor. But the one thing I will clarify is that I was a first responder for over a decade, and I'm very honored to be here with such a important subject. And I have a question for you, Susie, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, Susie, if I could ask you a question, and maybe we could just use our imagination, since this is such an important subject involving not just first responders. I mean, today the focus, number one, the primary purpose is to bring awareness to anyone out there that might be suffering from such a complicated, confusing, debilitating, and then life-threatening disease, which is PTSD. So if you could, I was going to ask you if we could use our imagination while we go throughout the interview, if that'd be okay. And I want to present a scenario to you.
Sean, I'd be delighted to hear it. I want to tell you something. I've heard about PTSD. I've known people with PTSD, but I've never really had it on my show. And the reason is because I never met somebody who has to deal with it the way you dealt with it, the way you actually have recovered from it. So I'm delighted for you to talk about your honest, sincere story of how you bounced back from PTSD.
Great. I look forward to answering your question. And if just for a moment, we can imagine. So Susan, you're going to be the dispatcher. You're a first responder with me right now. So you're in the dispatch center right now. Okay. And this is going to kind of emphasize the importance of what we're about to do. We're about to share some honest, sincere truth about my experience. And again, it's my experience as to what I went through, what it was like before, what it was like becoming a first responder, and what happened, and what I'm doing now to battle it. So just to answer your question, PTSD, simply reoccurrent mental and physical distress, right? But let me give you my answer. It's invisible. It's invisible wounding. It's hemorrhaging on the inside. So the one that suffers, that goes through, when PTS comes to the point where it becomes a significant disorder and a problem, where it becomes a debilitating and life-threatening disease, to where the individual starts to suffer in such a way that the individual can't function. Well, I'm talking about myself. So my description is it's a hemorrhaging that unfortunately can't be seen, kind of like in comparison. If someone ends up with, cancer or any other unfortunate diseases that they might have, they go to the hospital, they know what it is, you can kind of see it, there's compassion there. The truth be told, with PTS, it's very misunderstood, it's very complicated, and my best description is that it's an invisible hemorrhaging and wounding, and it's real. So I'm going to go ahead and surrender to you. You're the dispatcher, Susie. If you want to go ahead and get out of me and prepare me, I'm the first responder right now. I'm imagining right now that there might be another first responder out there listening that needs to hear what we're about to do.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm very interested in having you do is to tell your story. You have a long story, a story that has been going on for a very long time. And did you actually identify your problem after you were a policeman? And if so, what did you do about it?
The truth be told, I was raised to a father who was a first responder and a mother, and I was the youngest of six in a beautiful family raised in Miami, Florida. Public servants, right? So I was kind of groomed. Growing up in Miami, Florida, I'm not gonna exaggerate. I had a great childhood, right? I had some things happen maybe in my childhood, but overall can't complain. So I go on, I become a collegiate basketball player. I'm a good student. I earn a scholarship to college, play basketball, and I get my education. And all of a sudden now it's time to decide on what I'm going to do with my life. Well, I chose to be a first responder simply because honestly, I always wanted to do something to help. I was raised to help. I was raised to serve, and I love the feeling on the inside. So in 2000, I became a deputy sheriff with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, and my journey began. And man, I tell you what, it was the best thing. It fit perfect. It fit my temperament. It was really a beautiful experience, and I was doing well. I was getting promoted. I was succeeding. I was developing relationships. It felt like I was making a difference. And then, probably about 6 years into my career, give or take, there was this slow deterioration. And I'll be honest with you, at that time, I had no idea what was happening. So, as a first responder, as one that is willing to put his life on the line, take an oath and go out there and, you know, serve the citizens that you serve and take all the risks and see all the things that you see. Because the truth be told, I'll say this, first responders make that choice. We choose to be first responders, yet the profession inherently deals with life and death on a regular basis, and we respond to 911 calls all the time. So what happens is that over time, going at this pace and at this speed of dealing with things that, let's just say, aren't normal in most professions on a daily basis to happen so frequently, what happened to me about 6 years in is I started to notice that something was wrong. Now, what do? I just keep pushing forward because that's the temperament, that's the spirit of a rescuer. I keep pushing forward, and I keep trying different things to keep myself, let me just say, balanced is one word to put it. Spiritually fit is another way to put it. So about 2007, some comrades had died in the line of duty. And I know we don't have the time today, but a lot of things had happened. A lot of traumatic events had happened that I just, what we call, stacked. I put them away. I filed them away. So when it comes to the definition of PTS, it's simply said, it's unprocessed trauma, right? So can I pinpoint exactly all those events? I could talk about that for a long time, but I'll tell you the truth. In my situation, it was a buildup over time that finally in 2010, I made a decision to change careers merely because I thought that would fix what was going on in me. And I had no clue what was happening to me.
Sean, I have to stop you here because it's a very interesting story that you're telling. But one of the things that is very usual is that most people who know or learn about PTSD, they learn it from television, they learn it from the movies, they learn it from the articles that they read or books that they read. And I just am curious because it's usually people who come out of war, people who are in Afghanistan, Iraq, places of that nature. And yet you're talking about a first responder who's a policeman, who's often thought as a very, if you will, and I can only say this, a very macho guy. And meanwhile, he's the guy or the gal who, when coming to a 9/11 event, suddenly something happens to them. And I didn't realize. So is it accurate when we watch these movies and they tell the story about people with PTSD?
Great question. I'll tell you what is accurate is that all of us, first responders and everyone, to include the civilians and everyone, we're all basic human beings. So I'm glad you mentioned that, the movies, the TV, because that ties into a lot of things. It ties into some of the misconceptions, is that PTSD is not unique just to first responders or military personnel, trauma nurses. PTSD can happen to anybody. It can happen to somebody right as they're born into the world, and they're born into traumatic situations. But what I am grateful for today, number one, I hope I answer your question, that PTSD does not discriminate. So it's not unique as we might perceive. And I'm so grateful we're talking about this, to careers such as first responders. But I will say this, I'm so happy that we're talking about this today in terms of PTSD first responders. It's because we're the ones that chose to take on such a career that, compared to other careers, has a lot of different dangerous, life-threatening, life and death situations, and we lose friends and we get hurt, and we're in what I call the resistance of our doing our job duties. And I'm very grateful that you bring this up, because a lot of times the first responders are expected to be, hey, that's just their job and they're supposed to, get through that, and they shouldn't experience that. Like, in other words, the perception in the movies is that we're some sort of superheroes or something
Yeah.
like that. Now, to clarify, basic human being is what I qualify as, and I want to thank the agencies that I served, and also the citizens that allowed me to serve them, because they gave me a gift. So I want to make sure that the people listening to understand that, as a true leader, as a true first responder, we know that we don't stand above or below anyone.
Now, what I would like you to do is walk us through the process of healing. Because the way you and I have talked about it, it took a long time and it wasn't easy. You suffered. So, with that in mind, what is the process? What did you do to get to the point where you are now?
Well, first and foremost, great question again. With the temperament of a rescuer, right? That a guy that has been able to figure things out and get through things and solve problems my whole life. I had to do the most important thing, which was in 2017. I had to finally raise my hand and say, I need help. Now, here's the other truth. When I went to go ask for help at that time, I'm grateful that I had the courage to do that, because that's not easy for our population, our tribe to do, because there's a lot of worry associated, that when you go in as a first responder and you raise your hand and you ask for help, historically, that doesn't always work out too well for you. And because of the lack of compassion and understanding, and you don't even know what's going on with the disease, because you haven't learned how to heal from it yet. It's invisible, and it just, it's something that you can't even comprehend. So in the beginning stages, to answer your question, number one, I had to actually say, hey, I need some help. And that's where it started. Now, the truth is, once I did that in 2017, we're here now in 2020. Let me simply explain how difficult it's been. I finally have my life back. I have recovered. My recovery will never end. I have more energy now, and I have more passion now for life than I ever had at any point in my life, and I'm 45 years old. That's the truth. So if there's anybody out there listening right now, a first responder, a family member of a first responder, or any suffering soul that's listening, the truth is, you have to raise your hand first. The second thing is, you're going to have to really get honest, and then be willing to do the work that's asked of you by those that have gone before you and who have recovered and who are living a life in which that you would like to live yourself. So what I'm trying to say is, it's been a lot of hard work. I have healed, but I haven't completely healed. I don't know if I ever will. But what you're doing for me right now, Susie, by letting me share, and maybe somebody else out there, one of my brothers, one of my comrades, because right now you're the dispatcher. You and I, we're 10-8 right now. And if there's somebody listening right now in the community of emergency services, or anybody that hears what I'm saying and they reach out, okay, and they start the process, that's the entire mission of what we're doing right now. And Susie, thank you. You're saving my life.
Well, I'm very delighted that that's how you feel, because it's true. I want everybody to understand and to kind of be able to relate to the issues that you're dealing with. Who were your support system as you were going through this? Did you have one? And how important is it your family or your friends support you while you're going through this?
Well, I'm very grateful. I mean, I basically, I guess I must have created some equity in my life at some point before my life came down to where it became almost completely unmanageable and almost lost my life. Now, thank God I have a loving family. I had a loving wife that actually helped me find ways to get help. And I'll get more into that. She works in risk management at HR at my former agency. All these things. I had cousins, you name it. Everybody. What's so interesting and sad is what happens to an individual in the gradual progression of PTS, along with the other mental disorders. And let me not discount what it leads to. It leads to uh, when you get on these medications over time, then it leads to chemical dependency. And that's a whole other plan of attack, but it's in conjunction. It exacerbates the PTS that you're going through. And by the way, I won't discount chemical dependency, because that's what happened with me. And I had to get honest and real and get with my family, my loved ones. And number one, totally surrender to the path of what I would describe as warriors that went before me and that were willing to teach me the path of recovery, which is basically to become a coach. What happens is you come back from battle, you come back from a long career in police work. You know, what we must rely on is each other, and sincerely not enable each other, tell each other the truth, show us what has to be done, and then the individual suffering, the first responder, has to have the courage to be willing to go through the hard work, which is, for our population, is not the easiest thing to do, which includes, for instance, therapy, one-on-one therapy with therapists, talking to a psychologist, which is EMDR therapy. There's all these various types of treatments, and I can talk on and on about it, but it really comes down to actually you sharing your experience and trying to put pen to paper, actually putting pen to paper and breaking down your life and breaking down these scenarios so that you can reprogram. I guess if I could best describe, imagine in between my ears is my hard drive. That's my life. That's my disk in between my ears. I'm just making this up as I go. You see, I have these experiences that are all programmed in, and now I had to get this disease. I had to get down and get honest and work with professionals, get a team, get the medications right, get off medications, and stop relying on what we would call self-medication, alcohol, you name it, all those things which happened to me. I had to go full-fledged all in, start healing slowly and getting my, what I call a motor back, because what PTSD does, it takes the life out of you. It makes you isolate. It physically, you start to have issues. I ended up having in 2012 and 2013, I ended up having 2 heart surgery, for a condition called AFib. And this was early in my life. I was only 37 years old. So I'm going to be quiet. And I just hope I answered your question properly, is that I had to get in front of those that have walked the path before and be willing to do what they told me.
Sean, I'm curious about what the impetus was for you to actually start your journey to health. A lot of people suffer. You're not alone, and I'm sure you know that. But they don't go for help, and they just go more and more and more into depression and anxiety, and their families don't even know what to do, how to identify the problem, and how to deal with it. But you did. You had something that said to you, I want to live. I want to have a great life. What was it that made that happen?
Well, I appreciate you mentioning that. We're talking about PTSD first responders. So the one thing that I know, that I was raised by my father and my mom, and I watched them. I watched my family and my brothers and sisters that I am so grateful that I served with, I'm still friends with. There is a temperament that we share, a spirit. They never say die attitude. right? And that this disease is so severe that even with that never say die, quit attitude, it's possible that I could have lost my life to this. So I didn't do it all by myself, but I will say that what got me to make this comeback, which will be for the rest of my life, and my primary purpose now in life is to give back. It's to share. And believe it or not, when I first signed up for the sheriff's office, it wasn't for the paycheck. If we really think about it, we get these pensions, we get these benefits and whatnot. I signed up strictly, honestly, to be a part of something greater than myself, which is basically the reward is the feeling that you get in service. So again, I thank you today because I get to be 10-8. I get to be in service right now and talk about the truth of the spirit of those that serve that can often be forgotten about and ignored because we're supposed to be superhuman. And also about this truth. The truth is, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you are the epitome of the agency. I don't care what award you get. This disease and PTS is a disease that tells you that you don't have a disease. Same thing with chemical dependency. It's a disease that tells you that you don't have a disease. So you can still have that fighting spirit and that will to live, right? But yet you can die. And I have friends of mine that have lost the battle over the last 3 years. Friends of mine that were amazing employees at the agencies that I work with. And unfortunately, they're either no longer here or their careers and their families have been significantly hurt by this. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did, Sean. And we're at the end of the show right now. So we're going to continue this conversation in the next show. But what I would like you to tell our audience is how they get in touch with you, how you can help them, because you're, for lack of any other word, you're the expert on this situation. So with that said, tell our audience if they want to speak to Sean Eugene Flynn, how they do that.
What I'm going to do is leave my email address, which will be my first initial S. My last name is Flynn, Flynn, 9179 at AOL.com. So I'm old school. So sflynn 9179 at AOL.com. Now, I'll end with this. We didn't get a chance to cover a lot of different things, which is fine. We only have 30 minutes. For any of those out there, and that includes my brothers and sisters in emergency services, the military, you name it. Any family member that calls, you are saving my life. And see what it is. It's a gift now to be able to be in service again. You did a great job, by the way, Susie, as a dispatcher. We went on this call, right? The call is over for the most part. Now we get to sit back and be ready for the next dispatch call. And that might come in the form of that email, sflynn9179 at AOL.com. By the way, again, I'll hammer home this disclaimer. I don't represent any agency. I represent myself. I am formerly a Deputy Sheriff Sergeant with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, formerly with Palm Beach County School Police. Right now, I stand alone, and I want to clarify that because if there's any different people from different agencies listening, that's important because I understand. I was a supervisor. I understand how this can be. This is a difficult subject for not just the individual that might be suffering that's listening. And I got to give, number one, credit where credit's due. We came together because my mentors led me back to the sheriff's office and back to the Palm Beach County School Board, and because they connected me with you, and now we get a chance to share about a difficult topic for not just the individual, but for the agencies as well.
Well, Sean, it's been actually one of the most informational and educational shows that I've done in a long time, and I really think that our audience should stay tuned for the next one, because in the next one we're going to get deeper and deeper into some of the ways in which people can recover from this horrible disease. And after that, we're going to talk about a lot of other things that people will be pleased to hear. So thank you, Sean, for being my co-host, and we'll continue this discussion in a short period of time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Susie.